And that, class, concludes our theoretical overview of survival techniques on Class 3 Deathworlds, Professor Zixnax announced, his tentacles waving with what passed for excitement among the Glorbans. Any questions before we move on to the practical segment? The classroom of assorted alien species remained silent, most of them trembling slightly at the mere thought of setting foot on a planet that could kill them in about, 17 different ways before they even finished screaming, "Oh shit. I knew I should have taken that cushy desk job on Proxima Centauri IV." At the back of the room, a lone human raised her hand, a mischievous glint in her eye that would have sent shivers down the spines of her classmates if any of them actually had spines. Yes, Specialist Sarah Connor, Professor Zixnax acknowledged, his eye stalks twitching nervously. He'd had humans in his class before, and it never ended well for his carefully prepared curriculum or his sanity. Sarah smirked, leaning back in her chair with the casual ease of someone who found the idea of a death world about as threatening as a mildly annoyed kitten. "Just wondering, Prof, when are we going to cover the real survival stuff? You know, the fun bits." The professor's tentacles drooped visibly. I'm not sure I understand, Specialist Connor. We've covered everything in the Galactic Federation's official survival manual for Class 3 environments. Sarah let out a bark of laughter that caused several of her more gelatinous classmates to vibrate in alarm. "Oh, come on. That manual wouldn't keep you alive for 5 minutes on a real death world. Where's the section on how to make a flamethrower out of a can of hairspray and a lighter, or how to set up elaborate traps using nothing but vines and pointy sticks? Hell, you didn't even mention the importance of a good catchphrase when facing down apex predators." The classroom erupted into a cacophony of alarm chirps, squeaks, and in the case of the Melodians, a haunting aria of existential dread. Professor Zixnax's color shifted rapidly through various shades of distress. "Specialist Connor, I must remind you that this is a basic survival course. We're not training to kick ass and take names," Sarah helpfully supplied, grinning from ear to ear. "Precisely," the professor exclaimed, before realizing what he'd agreed to and deflating slightly. "I mean, no. This course is designed to help students survive long enough for rescue, not to conquer the planet and establish dominion over its savage inhabitants," Sarah offered, clearly enjoying herself far too much. A flutterling in the front row fainted, its delicate wings crumpling under the weight of such terrifying concepts. The professor took a deep breath, which was quite impressive considering he breathed through his skin. "Specialist Connor, perhaps you'd like to share some of your expertise with the class, in a strictly theoretical capacity, of course." Sarah's grin widened to truly alarming proportions. "Oh, I thought you'd never ask, Prof. Mind if I use the holo projector?" Before the professor could reconsider his life choices, Sarah had bounded to the front of the room, her heavy boots causing micro-tremors that sent several of her more sensitive classmates into fits of anxiety. "All right, you delicate flowers," Sarah began, cracking her knuckles ominously. "Let's talk about real survival. First things first, when you land on a death world, assume everything is trying to kill you. The plants, the animals, the rocks, even the air itself. Hell, assume your own shadow is plotting your demise." She pulled up an image of a lush, alien forest on the holoprojector. Several students cooed at its beauty, clearly missing the point. "See this?" Sarah pointed to a particularly vibrant flower. "On Earth, we call this the shut up and die lily. One whiff of its pollen, and you'll be pushing up daisies faster than you can say, 'Ooh, pretty.'" A Vaporan, in the third row, raised a gelatinous pseudopod. "Excuse me, but what are daisies?" Sarah waved dismissively. "Earth flowers. Not important. What is important is that you need to approach every single thing on a death world with a healthy mix of paranoia and violence." The holo image changed to show a serene-looking lake. "Now this looks nice and refreshing, doesn't it? Perfect for a swim after a long day of not dying." "Wrong." Sarah slammed her fist on the desk for emphasis, causing half the class to jump, or in the case of the anti-gravity species, drop in surprise. "This, my friends, is what we call a nope pond. Those ripples. Not wind. Those are the exoblax eels, just waiting for some poor, unsuspecting alien to dip a toe in. Next thing you know, you're being digested from the inside out while the eels sing sea shanties." A brave quantum shifter spoke up, its form flickering between states of matter. But the manual says to seek out water sources for survival." Sarah laughed, the sound somewhere between genuine amusement and the war cry of a berserker. Oh, sweet summer child. On a death world, water is just another way to die, but wet. No, what you want to do is find the biggest, meanest predator around and make it your new best friend. The holo image shifted again, this time showing a massive, saber-toothed creature that looked like it ate nightmares for breakfast. This lovely lady is what we call a murder fluff. Your first instinct might be to run screaming. Wrong move. You march right up to that beast, look it in the eye, and say something badass like, "You're one ugly motherfoo." Specialist Connor Professor Zixnax interrupted, his tentacles tied in knots of distress. Perhaps we could focus on more conventional survival techniques. Sarah shrugged, a motion that sent ripples of terror through her invertebrate classmates. Fine, fine. Let's talk about shelter. Now, the manual probably tells you to find a nice, cozy cave, right? A chorus of hesitant nods answered her. Wrong, Sarah bellowed, causing several students to instinctively camouflage themselves. Caves are where things go to plot your doom. No, what you want to do is climb the tallest tree you can find and build yourself a nest, preferably with spikes, lots of spikes. The flutterling who had fainted earlier raised a trembling appendage. But what if we can't climb? Sarah's grin took on a predatory edge. That's the beauty of it, Buttercup. By the time you're done with this course, you'll be able to climb anything. Trees, cliffs, the social hierarchy of a pack of hyper-intelligent space wolves, you name it, you'll climb it. The holo image changed once more, this time displaying a dizzying array of crude but effective-looking weapons. Now we're talking, Sarah exclaimed, her eyes lighting up with an enthusiasm that sent shivers through the classroom. Survival isn't just about not dying, it's about making sure everything else dies first. Professor Zixnax made a sound like a deflating balloon. Specialist Connor, I must insist. Can it? Prof. Sarah said, not unkindly. These kids need to know the truth. Out there, in the big bad galaxy, it's kill or be killed. Or, if you're feeling diplomatic, kill and then negotiate with the next of kin. She pointed to a particularly nasty-looking contraption. This little beauty is what we call a gravity-assisted rapid disassembly device, Oregon, as we like to call it back home, a GARDDN tool. She paused for laughter, but was met with confused silence and one muffled sob from the back of the room. Tough crowd, Sarah muttered. Anyway, this baby uses the planet's own gravity to turn any poor sucker who steps on it into a fine mist. Great for perimeter defense, not so great for making friends. A holographic representation of the device in action appeared, causing several students to lose their lunch, their breakfast, and possibly their will to live. Now, I know what you're thinking, Sarah continued, undeterred by the green-tinged faces and equivalent alien features around her. But Sarah, you're saying, I'm a peace-loving Zenathian monk. I could never harm another living creature. Well, buckle up, Buttercup, because on a death world, you're either the one setting the traps or the one going splat in them. She flicked through a few more images, each more terrifying than the last. Here we have the classic Punji stick pit, perfect for those pesky underground dwellers. And this little number, we call it the Yeet Seat One Step, and whatever unfortunate critter triggered is going on a one-way trip to the stratosphere. A gravitarian student, its massive body condensed into a containment suit, spoke up. But what about using technology? Surely our advanced equipment. Sarah cut him off with a laugh that could have curdled milk if any of the aliens present had been brave enough to bring dairy products to class. Oh, my sweet summer gas giant. The first rule of Death World survival is this: assume all your fancy tech is going to fail you faster than a politician's promises on election day. She pulled up an image of what looked like a pile of rocks and sticks arranged in a vaguely humanoid shape. This, my friends, is the height of Death World fashion. We call it the Don't Mind Me, I'm just a pile of debris suit. It's got everything you need: camouflage, protection from the elements, and enough pointy bits to make anything think twice about taking a bite out of you. As the flutterling, who had fainted earlier, raised a trembling wing. But how do we move in such a contraption? Sarah's grin turned positively feral. That's the neat part, you don't. You stay perfectly still, blending in with your surroundings, becoming one with the death world. And when some poor, unsuspecting creature wanders by, thinking you're just another harmless pile of rubble, bam, you spring into action, unleashing all your pent-up survival fury. She demonstrated with a series of rapid movements that looked part martial arts, part interpretive dance, and part seizure. Several students instinctively engaged their species' flight or fight responses, which in the case of the evaporans meant literally turning into mist. Professor Zixnax, who had been slowly inching towards the door, cleared his throat, or what passed for a throat among the Glorbans. Specialist Connor, while your unique perspective is certainly, enlightening, perhaps we should return to the approved curriculum. Sarah waved a hand dismissively. Fine, fine. But don't come crying to me when your students end up as lunch for some six-legged monstrosity because they were too busy trying to remember which end of the emergency beacon to point at the sky. She turned back to the class, her expression suddenly serious. Listen up, you lot. The galaxy's a big, bad place, and death worlds are the worst of the worst. But you know what? They're also the most alive places you'll ever see. Everything there has fought tooth and nail, claw and tentacle, to survive. And if you want to make it, you've got to do the same. Sarah's voice took on a passionate intensity that had even the most skeptical students leaning forward. It's not just about physical survival. It's about keeping your mind sharp, your spirit unbroken. You've got to laugh in the face of danger, crack jokes while you're running for your life, and always have a witty one-liner ready for when you finally take down that apex predator that's been stalking you for days. She pulled up one last image on the holoprojector, a stunning vista of an alien world, beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. This, my friends, is what it's all about. The thrill of facing the unknown, of pitting yourself against the very worst the universe can throw at you, and coming out on top. It's not about conquering the death world, it's about earning its respect. For a moment, the classroom was silent, the students captivated by Sarah's words and the awe-inspiring image before them. Then, tentatively, a photosynthian near the front raised a leaf-like appendage. Yes, Sarah acknowledged, her tone uncharacteristically gentle. How do you do it? The photosynthian asked, its voice barely above a whisper. How do you find the courage to face such terrors? Sarah's face softened into a genuine smile. That's the secret, kid. The courage was in you all along. You just need something to bring it out. For some, it's the will to survive. For others, it's the thrill of adventure. And for some of us, she winked conspiratorially. Well, let's just say there's nothing quite like the rush of looking death in the eye and saying, "Not today, sunshine." The photosynthian's leaves rustled in what might have been a nervous laugh. Now Sarah continued, clapping her hands together with enough force to make several students jump, who's ready to put all this theory into practice. A chorus of alarmed squeaks, chirps, and one particularly mournful aria filled the room. That's the spirit, Sarah exclaimed, either misinterpreting or deliberately ignoring the sounds of distress. Professor, I think it's time we took this class on a little field trip. I know just the planet class 4.5 Death World, recently discovered. Perfect for some hands-on learning. Professor Zixnax's color drained to a pale, sickly hue. Specialist Connor, I must protest. The curriculum clearly states. Oh, come on, Prof. Sarah interrupted, her eyes gleaming with mischief. Where's your sense of adventure? Think of it as an opportunity for some, accelerated learning. The professor's tentacles twisted into knots of anxiety. But the liability forms, the safety protocols, Sarah waved off his concerns with a dismissive gesture. Details. We'll call it an impromptu survival simulation or something. Trust me, these kids will learn more in one day on a real death world than they would in a year of classroom lectures. She turned back to the class, spreading her arms wide. So, what do you say, future survivors of the galaxy? Who's ready for the learning experience of a lifetime? The response was a mix of terrified silence, muffled sobs, and the distinct sound of several students attempting to phase shift into alternate dimensions to escape their fate. I'll take that as a unanimous yes, Sarah declared, either oblivious to or deliberately ignoring the palpable fear in the room. Prof, start prepping the shuttle. Class, pack your bags or whatever passes for luggage among your species. Oh, and don't forget to write your wills, just in case. She winked, and several students fainted on the spot. Chop, people. We've got a death world to conquer, and the clock's ticking. After all, Sarah's grin widened to truly alarming proportions. In survival, you're either quick or you're dead. As the class erupted into chaos, with students alternating between panic and desperate attempts to drop the course, Sarah stood at the front, hands on her hips, surveying the scene with the satisfaction of a true agent of chaos. Professor Zixnax, realizing he had lost all control of the situation, simply slumped in defeat. I knew I should have taken that teaching position on the tranquil meditation plains of Zagzylox VII, he muttered to himself. Sarah overheard and slapped him on the back, or what passed for a back among Glorbans, nearly knocking him over. Cheer up, Prof. Think of the stories you'll be able to tell after this. Assuming we all survive, of course. And with that ominous statement hanging in the air, Sarah began herding her reluctant students towards what promised to be either the greatest adventure of their lives or a spectacularly bad idea, possibly both. As the last of the students were coaxed or, in some cases, dragged out of the classroom, Sarah turned to face Professor Zixnax, who was still frozen in a state of tentacle, knotted panic. "Come on, Prof," she said, her voice a mix of encouragement and barely contained excitement. "You're not going to let your students face a death world without proper supervision, are you?" The professor's eye stalk swiveled towards her, radiating a look that could only be described as resigned horror. "I suppose not," he managed to stammer out. Sarah's grin widened. "That's the spirit. Now, let's go make some memories that'll have the Galactic Psychiatric Association working overtime for years to come." As they made their way to the shuttle bay, the corridors of the Galactic Federation Academy echoed with a cacophony of distressed alien vocalizations, punctuated by Sarah's enthusiastic descriptions of the various ways their impending field trip could go horribly wrong. ... And that's why you should always carry a spare pair of underwear, Sarah was saying as they reached the shuttle. "Trust me, nothing ruins your day quite like facing down a pack of razor-toothed carnivores with damp shorts." A gelatinous blob student who had been oozing along in Sarah's wake suddenly solidified in alarm. But I don't wear underwear, or any clothes." Sarah patted the student's now rigid form consolingly, leaving a hand-shaped indent. "Don't worry, buddy. In your case, just try not to, dissolve in terror." Although she paused, a thoughtful look crossing her face. That could actually be a pretty effective defense mechanism. Mental note: explore the tactical applications of fear-induced liquefaction. As the students reluctantly filed into the shuttle, Sarah took stock of their gear. Her face fell as she surveyed the pitiful collection of standard-issue survival packs and electronic gadgets. "Oh no, no," she muttered, shaking her head. "This won't do at all. All right, everybody out. We're making a quick detour to the equipment room."
20 minutes, and several violated safety protocols later, Sarah had outfitted the class with an assortment of makeshift weapons and armor that looked like they'd been cobbled together from the reject pile of a post-apocalyptic cosplay convention.
"There," she exclaimed, stepping back to admire her handiwork. "Now, you're all ready to face a death world in style." The flutterling, now sporting a helmet made from an upturned wastebasket and wielding a mop handle sharpened to a deadly point, raised a trembling wing. Is this really necessary?" Sarah's eyes gleamed with a manic light. "Necessary? No. Awesome. Absolutely. Now, who wants to learn how to turn their standard-issue communicator into a sonic grenade?" Before anyone could answer, or more likely, run screaming, the shuttle's pilot, a stoic Andromedian with 4 arms and the patience of a saint, announced that they were ready for takeoff. As the shuttle lifted off, Sarah pressed her face against a viewport, watching as the academy grew smaller below them. Next stop: glorious adventure and/or horrible death. The quantum shifter, who had been flickering between states of panic-induced plasma and solid dread, managed to stabilize long enough to ask, "Specialist Connor, what exactly are we going to do once we reach this death world?" Sarah turned, her grin now reaching proportions that would make a Cheshire cat jealous. "Excellent question. We're going to engage in some good old-fashioned human-style survival training. Think of it as a character-building exercise with the added bonus of constant mortal peril." She began pacing the length of the shuttle, her improvised armor clanking with each step. Lesson 1: everything on a death world wants to kill you. The plants, the animals, the weather, even the geography itself. Your job is to kill it first. A collective gasp of horror rippled through the shuttle. "Oh, relax," Sarah said, waving a hand dismissively. "I'm not suggesting we commit planeticide. Just, be prepared to commit a little light murder in the name of survival." Professor Zixnax, who had been silently questioning every life choice that had led him to this moment, finally spoke up. "Specialist Connor, I must insist that we adhere to the Galactic Federation's guidelines for non-violent interactions with alien ecosystems." Sarah's laugh could have stripped paint. "Oh, Prof, you're adorable. Tell you what, you can try explaining the concept of non-violence to the first acid-spitting, mind-controlling fungus we encounter. I'm sure it'll be very receptive." As the shuttle entered the atmosphere of their destination, Sarah's expression turned serious for a moment. "Listen up, everyone. What we're about to do is dangerous, potentially traumatizing, and almost certainly against at least 17 different Galactic Federation regulations. But it's also going to be the most intense, life-changing experience of your lives." She paused, looking each student in the eye, or nearest equivalent. "You're going to be scared. You're going to be uncomfortable. You might even think you're going to die. But remember this, you're tougher than you know, and by the time we leave this planet, you'll have stared death in the face and lived to tell the tale." For a moment, the shuttle was silent save for the rumble of atmospheric entry. Then, surprisingly, the gelatinous blob spoke up, its voice wavering but determined. I think I'm ready, Specialist Connor." Sarah's face lit up with genuine pride. "That's the spirit. Now, who else is ready to spit in the eye of certain doom and maybe violate a few laws of nature along the way?" A chorus of hesitant but growing enthusiasm answered her. Even Professor Zix-Nax's tentacles unknotted slightly, a flicker of curiosity replacing his constant look of dread. As the shuttle touched down on the surface of the Deathworld, Sarah was the first to the door, her hand on the release mechanism. She turned back to the class, her eyes sparkling with a mix of mischief and genuine excitement. "All right, you beautiful disasters," she announced. "Welcome to Survival 101 Deathworld Edition. Let's go make some memories that'll have us laughing nervously in therapy for years to come." With that, she slammed the release, and the door hissed open to reveal a landscape that seemed to have been designed by a committee of sadistic artists with a fondness for the color menace. The air that rushed in was thick with the scent of alien vegetation and the distinct aroma of, "Oh God, what is that, and why does it smell like it wants to digest my soul?" in the distance. Something that sounded like a cross between a banshee's wail and a particularly aggressive garbage disposal echoed across the twisted landscape. Sarah took a deep breath, her grin widening to truly alarming proportions. "Ah, smell that? That's the sweet aroma of adventure and impending doom. Come on, class. Time to show this planet who's boss." As the students hesitantly filed out of the shuttle, each step filled with a mixture of terror and growing determination, Sarah couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. Sure, they were scared. Sure, this whole endeavor was probably going to end in tears, screaming, and possibly a strongly worded letter from the Galactic Federation's Ethics Committee. But damn if it wasn't going to be one hell of a learning experience. And who knew? Maybe by the end of this little field trip, she'd have turned this ragtag group of terrified aliens into a bunch of certified badasses. Or at least into beings who could face their nightmares without immediately dissolving into puddles of terror, literally, in the case of the gelatinous blob. As the group gathered around her, makeshift weapons clutched tightly and eyes darting nervously at every rustle in the alien underbrush, Sarah clapped her hands together, the sound echoing ominously across the landscape. "All right, you future survivors of the galaxy," she announced, her voice filled with the kind of manic glee that usually preceded either greatness or disaster. "Let's go poke this death world with a stick and see what happens." And with that, Sarah Connor, specialist in Deathworld survival and self-proclaimed agent of chaos, led her motley crew of reluctant adventurers into the waiting maw of the most hostile environment any of them had ever encountered. Little did the Deathworld know, it was about to meet its match in the form of one very enthusiastic human and her band of increasingly less terrified alien students. The galaxy would never be the same again. As they ventured deeper into the alien wilderness, Sarah's voice could be heard giving what could charitably be called advice. "Remember, if it has more teeth than the entire Galactic Dental Association, it's probably not here to make friends. That plant just hissed at you. Hiss back louder. Assert your dominance. If the ground starts bubbling, that's nature's way of saying, hey, maybe don't stand there unless you want to be tomorrow's geological formation." And so began the most unorthodox, terrifying, and strangely exhilarating field trip in the history of the Galactic Federation Academy. May the universe have mercy on their souls, because this death world certainly wouldn't.